Welcome to Module 3, Ethics and Values. In this module, we're going to talk about a number of issues which are fundamental, central to how international civil servants work. And these values, these principles, are relevant to anybody who works with WHO in any capacity, including in emergencies. So partners, external experts, consultants, staff, everyone should make themselves aware of these issues. In this module, we will look at the link between values, ethics, and our actions. We will overview humanitarian principles and WHO's guiding principles for its work across the world. We will examine personal values that must guide our actions, even in emergency response. We will summarize UN core values. We will look at the concept of unconscious bias, and we will look at the issue of harassment and abuse, as well as sexual exploitation. By the end of this module, we hope that you will be able to explain the link between the humanitarian principles, WHO guiding principles, and UN core values and your actions. We would like you to list humanitarian principles, WHO's guiding principles, and UN core values. We hope you'll be able to explain what unconscious bias is and how it might affect you and your actions. Finally, we would like you to describe how to recognize and respond to harassment or abuse to yourself and others. Working in a response will require you to work in a complex, sometimes stressful environment with different or new colleagues. Even under pressure, you are expected to uphold and embody the highest values and ethical standards that are the foundation of the UN system and of WHO's approach. These in turn will not only help in how we implement a response operation, but will also help you with teamwork, which is an essential approach to working well in the incident management system. There are strong links between values, principles, and actions that we endorse. When working in a response environment, you must follow human rights law, humanitarian principles, WHO guiding principles, and the UN core values to ensure you do the right thing and manage complex and sometimes confusing situations. As international civil servants and anybody working under the World Health Organization flag, we have to embody the highest aspirations, goals, and values of the World Health Organization and the United Nations. At the same time, we have to bear responsibility for translating these ideals into reality and into our day-to-day words, speech, and actions. Values are the embodiment of what we stand for. To behave ethically is to behave in a manner consistent with our values. Let's look at humanitarian principles. Humanitarian principles are derived from core principles, which have long guided the work of the International Committee of the Red Cross and the National Red Cross Red Crescent Societies. The principal centrality to the work of humanitarian organizations, including WHO, is formally enshrined in 2 UN General Assembly resolutions. The first 3 principles, humanity, neutrality, and impartiality, are endorsed in the General Assembly Resolution 46/182, which was adopted in 1991. This resolution also established the role of the Emergency Relief Coordinator. General Assembly Resolution 58/114 in 2004 added independence as a 4th key principle underlying humanitarian action. The General Assembly has repeatedly affirmed the importance of promoting and respecting these principles within the framework of humanitarian assistance. So this applies to anybody who works in humanitarian response, and it includes WHO's work in humanitarian response. Commitment to the principles has also been expressed at an institutional level by many humanitarian organizations, including the World Health Organization. There are 4 humanitarian principles. The first is humanity. Human suffering must be addressed wherever it is found. The purpose of humanitarian action is to protect life and health and ensure respect for human beings. This principle, the principle of humanity, speaks to the compassion that all human beings should have for others. It is unconditional. The second humanitarian principle is neutrality. Neutrality. Humanitarian actors must not take sides in hostilities or engage in controversies of a political, racial, religious, or ideological nature. Our neutrality is central for humanitarian assistance. The third principle is impartiality. Impartiality means that humanitarian action must be carried out on the basis of need alone, and we must give priority to the most urgent situations, the most urgent cases of distress, and we should make no distinction on the basis of nationality, race, gender, religious belief, class, or political opinions. The principle of impartiality helps us focus humanitarian assistance to take it to those who most need it. The fourth and last principle is independence. Humanitarian action must be autonomous from political, economic, military, or other objectives that any actor or stakeholder may hold with regard to the areas where humanitarian action is being implemented. So independence is a very important principle that keeps our humanitarian assistance focused in a very independent way, focusing on the humanitarian mission at hand. There is a great deal to read on these humanitarian principles, and of particular note is the Code of Conduct for the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement and non-governmental organizations in disaster relief. These provide a set of common standards for organizations and agencies involved in humanitarian activities, including a commitment to adhere to the humanitarian principles. To date, more than 492 organizations have signed this code. Also of note is the Humanitarian Charter and the minimum standards in humanitarian response elaborated by the Sphere Project. Moving to the human rights framework, the international human rights framework is robust and authoritative. It arises out of the terrible atrocities of World War II. Human rights stand for the proposition that rights cannot be given or taken away by government, but exist innately for all human beings. Human rights are composed of many different aspects, including civil and political rights, and social, cultural, and economic rights. They are part of customary international law, as evidenced by the world embracing the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Human rights are also part of binding and enforceable international law. This is evidenced by the broad treaty obligations of 2 major international covenants. The first is the International Covenant on Social, Economic, Cultural Rights, the ICESCR. The second is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR. These documents contain a wide range of health-related rights, including the right to health, and have been widely ratified by governments around the world. Additional human rights conventions and guidelines govern rights of women, children, religious or ethnic minorities, and persons with physical and mental disabilities. Let's look at human rights in health. The WHO Constitution envisages the highest attainable standard of health as a fundamental right of every human being. Understanding health as a human right creates a legal obligation on states to ensure access to timely, accessible, acceptable, affordable healthcare of appropriate quality, as well as to provide for the underlying determinants of health, such as safe and portable water, sanitation, food, housing, and health-related information and education, as well as gender equality. A state's obligation to support the right to health, including through the allocation of maximum available resources to progressively realize this goal, is reviewed through various international human rights mechanisms, such as the Universal Periodic Review or the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. In many instances, the right to health has been adopted into domestic or constitutional law. A rights-based approach to health requires that health policy and programs must prioritize the needs of the farthest behind, those in most need, toward a greater equity. This is a principle that has been echoed in recently adopted 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Universal Health Coverage. The right to health must be enjoyed without discrimination on any grounds, including race, age, ethnicity, or any other status. Non-discrimination and equality require states to take steps to redress any discriminatory law, practice, or policy. WHO is a great advocate and a champion of the right to health of all people. Another feature of rights-based approaches is meaningful participation. Participation means ensuring that national stakeholders, including non-state actors such as non-governmental organizations and communities where appropriate, are meaningfully involved in all phases of programming, assessment, analysis, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. However, during emergencies, some human rights can be derogated or limited. Most civil and political rights can be suspended. An example of a right that is sometimes suspended in health emergencies includes the restricting the freedom of movement of people to contain a dangerous disease outbreak. Non-derogable human rights are those that cannot be limited even during an emergency. These rights are absolute. These include the right to life, the right to be free from torture, freedom from slavery, right to freedom of thought or religion, and the right to be treated as a person before the law. If you assess that non-derogable human rights may be violated, you have a duty to inform management. Please take note of who is involved, the affected community, the actors, and any witnesses. What is happening, how, when, and where. Be willing to receive information from people, but before doing so, be mindful of maintaining their safety and yours. Sharing such information might place you at risk in many situations. You should listen and record what you were told or saw. Note the contact details of whoever provided the information and ask how best to reach them again. Inform them of your role. Explain what you will do with the information they give and ask for their consent. Don't raise expectations. When applicable, inform them about how they can contact UN staff who work on human rights, and you should share the information you gain promptly with your team leader. WHO has its own guiding principles for its personnel, whether they are staff or external consultants. The World Health Organization staff regulations and staff rules, and the WHO ethical principles and conduct for staff establish all civil servants' international character and their independence. These do not just apply to WHO staff, but to anyone who is working under the WHO flag, including partners, networks, and volunteers, as deployed as part of a WHO response. The role of WHO international civil servants is to assist the organization in its commitment to the attainment by all peoples of the highest possible level of health. And this is enshrined in WHO's Constitution, Article 1. WHO has an oath of office that it expects all staff and any person working with WHO to take and observe. It's good practice to read this and read this oath out aloud if you can. It reads, "I solemnly swear to exercise in all loyalty, discretion, and conscience the functions entrusted to me as an international civil servant of the World Health Organization, to discharge those functions and regulate my conduct with the interests of the WHO only in view, and not to seek or accept instructions in regard to the performance of my duties from any government or other authority external to the organization." Staff Regulations, Article 1.1.10. There are personal values that must guide our actions at WHO. The first is loyalty to WHO's goals, missions, priorities, and policies. The second is integrity and honesty in all our actions and decisions that may affect WHO while we are on duty and during our rest time. Third, independence and impartiality from external sources and authorities. And fourth, technical excellence in everything we do. Discretion, accountability, and respect for dignity, worth, equality of all persons, and embracing and promoting diversity in our teams. These align quite well with the UN core values, and they are divided into three main ideas: integrity, respect for diversity, and professionalism. Integrity means that we demonstrate the values of the United Nations in our daily activities and behaviors, that we act without consideration of personal gain, that we are able to resist undue political pressure in decision making, that we do not abuse power or authority, that we stand by our decisions that are in the organization's interest, even if they're unpopular, and that we take prompt action in cases of unprofessional or unethical behavior. Professionalism means that we show pride in our work and achievements, that we demonstrate professional competence and mastery of our subject matter, in WHO what we call technical excellence. It means that we are conscientious and efficient in meeting the commitments, observing deadlines, achieving results, that we are motivated by professional rather than personal concerns, that we show persistence when faced with difficult problems or challenges, and we remain calm in stressful situations. Respect for diversity means that we work effectively with people from all backgrounds. We treat all people with dignity and respect. We treat men and women equally. We show respect for an understanding of diverse points of view and demonstrate this understanding in our daily work and decision making. We examine our own biases and behaviors to avoid stereotypical responses, and we do not discriminate against any individual or group. You will see that many of the WHO values and the UN values are the same. They're just worded in different categories. Required for applying these values and principles is an idea called unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is something that is within all of us. It is an automatic response. It could be subconscious or unconscious, which helps us in our day-to-day life to make quick judgments of people and situations. They're psychological shortcuts, if you like. They're mainly influenced by our own backgrounds and cultural and personal experiences, so each person's unconscious bias could be unique to them. Even people who sincerely believe in equality can act in a biased manner, unconsciously, subconsciously, or involuntarily. Everyone has unconscious biases unique to themselves. The aim is to know and mitigate against our unconscious biases. We may have many common biases. These could include gender, age, weight, skin color, physical disability, beauty, job title, level of education, sexuality, our accent, social status, or religion. So what can I do? What can you do? The first step is to accept that we all have unconscious bias and to investigate and acknowledge our own unconscious biases. There are many online tests, and on this slide you will see the link to one. Find some quiet time and do this test so that you start becoming aware of your own unconscious biases. It's really important to be wary of first impressions that you may have of people. Avoid quick judgments about people. Aim to learn more about stereotypes and try to know and mitigate your own unconscious biases. Don't be afraid to try new things and talk to people you trust about this. Harassment and abuse is unfortunately an important issue even during emergency response. Harassment, according to WHO policy, means any behavior that is directed at another staff member or other personnel and has the effect of offending, humiliating, or intimidating them. It means the person knows or reasonably ought to know what they do would offend, humiliate, or intimidate others, and it interferes the staff members or the personnel's ability to carry out functions at work and creates an intimidating or hostile work environment. Intent to be offensive, humiliating, or intimidating is not necessary for harassment to occur. As long as the person at the receiving end of perceived harassment feels offended, humiliated, or intimidated, harassment is accepted to have taken place. Sexual harassment is a particularly serious form of harassment and includes any unwelcome and unwanted sexual advance, requests for sexual favors, or other unwelcome or unwanted written, verbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature with a staff member, colleague, or personnel. Behavior determined to constitute harassment will be subject to the full range of disciplinary measures and is being taken by WHO extremely seriously. If you are subject to harassment or observe someone else who behaves in a way that harasses or is perceived to harass another person, you should report it to your supervisor and follow the informal and formal procedures that exist to address this serious issue. You should always be careful and mindful to conduct yourself in a way that you are not a perpetrator of harassment, even if unintended. And you should never be a silent witness to any behavior that could be perceived as harassment. Looking at the way we interact with our stakeholders and affected communities during emergencies, we also have to look at the issue of sexual exploitation and abuse. The World Health Organization and the UN aim to help populations who need our support. Therefore, any form of sexual exploitation of these populations is an affront to the values of our entire system, and it is a betrayal of the trust that is placed in us. WHO's policy on sexual exploitation and abuse, prevention and response addresses the behavior of all WHO staff and collaborators, including consultants, contractors, and suppliers, towards third parties as well as other UN staff members. It is very, very important that you brief yourself on these issues and what can constitute sexual exploitation and abuse during your work in emergencies. I want to emphasize here that the World Health Organization has zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse. It is considered a serious misconduct and grounds for disciplinary measures, including summary dismissal and criminal prosecution. All staff members and personnel who have reason to suspect sexual exploitation and abuse by a WHO staff or collaborator or another UN international civil servant must report the matter through the Integrity Hotline. The Integrity Hotline is a free of charge and confidential channel to report concerns of wrongdoing at WHO. The link is given on your slide. We've provided additional resources for you. The OCHA on Message, Humanitarian Principles document, WHO's 25 questions and answers on health and human rights and health fact sheet, WHO staff regulation and staff rules. UN Competencies for the Future looks at the positive behaviors that we are trying to cultivate in our staff and in all collaborators that we work with. There is more information that you can access about unconscious bias, and there is a very important document integrating ethics in infectious disease outbreaks that you should read should you have the opportunity. Thank you very much for paying attention to this very important module. This module should be seen not as a separate standalone learning exercise. It should be integrated into the way we think, the way we approach, we implement and reflect on our work. This is the foundation on which all work, including emergency response, should be based. Thank you.